The Story Bridge is an instantly recognisable icon of Brisbane, but recent assessments have found it to be desperately in need of restoration if it's to continue to serve the city into the future. In this video on the Brisbane Channel, we're going to dive into a recent report that spells out exactly how dire the situation is and what needs to be done so that the bridge can continue for another 100 years. So what's the significance of the Story Bridge anyway? Well, for a start, it's an instantly recognisable landmark in Brisbane's skyline, appearing in promotional materials, postcards and advertisements. Part of the Light Up Brisbane program, it's often lit up in different colours to highlight various occasions, festivals and events, and plays a key role in Riverfire, the city's biggest annual fireworks display. It's a popular tourist attraction, with the Story Bridge Adventure Climb recently introducing the world's first ever accessible bridge climb. But perhaps the main thing is the cultural significance of the bridge, leading to its inclusion on the Queensland Heritage Register. Also, it carries a lot of traffic, which is important too, I guess. Commissioned by the Queensland Government and designed by Dr. John Bradfield, who also designed the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Story Bridge was built between 1935 and 1940, with a budget of around £1.6 million. It was built during the Great Depression, a time when immediate need and cost-saving measures were prioritised over long-term durability. So at the time, a full 100-year lifespan was the very most that was ever expected. Today, it's the third busiest bridge in Brisbane, with over 100,000 vehicles crossing each day, as well as up to 4,000 active transport trips. Well, that's when the footpaths are actually open. The Story Bridge and the Captain Cook Bridge, both free to cross, see a volume of traffic that puts them at full capacity, while toll bridges and tunnels see a far lower proportion of their potential traffic volume pass over or through each day. Of the vehicles crossing the Story Bridge each day, less than 60% are part of trips made within Brisbane, with over 42% of trips made by vehicles from other parts of Queensland and interstate. Importantly, the bridge facilitates 43% of daily non-tolled inner-city river crossings, so the impact of discontinuing its use would be massive. Well, that's according to the committee that compiled the report, but we'll get to that and some arguments against it in a moment. But first, recent assessments on the condition of the bridge have revealed that it's not doing so well these days. It wasn't designed to cater to the volumes of traffic and size of vehicles it now supports. Heavy haulage vehicles, which council have now restricted to the inner lanes of the bridge, have created fatigue and overstress for the structure of the bridge. There's also significant corrosion across the bridge structure. On top of this, a structural assessment of the footpath conducted after ex-tropical cyclone Alfred in March found that the footpaths have deteriorated at an accelerated rate. The council is fast-tracking installation of protective netting to contain concrete spalling, which is where chunks of concrete break away from the main structure, often revealing the reinforcing inside. So how did it get this way? Has the council been negligent in its maintenance of the bridge? Well, not according to the independent Story Bridge Restoration Committee. Brisbane City Council took over the maintenance of the bridge from 1947, when it was transferred to them from the state government. They took £750,000 of the debt for the bridge, but at the same time abolished all tolls. It took them over 40 years to pay for redemption and interest, with all of it being cleared in 1989. They built a maintenance facility under the bridge, and in 1947, the first year council were responsible for the bridge, the annual budget was £4,500, equivalent to $363,000 in 2025 dollars. That budget has increased to $3 million each year, covering concrete repairs, cleaning, painting, graffiti removal, and an annual washdown. On top of that, over the last 20 years, an additional $120 million was put into bridge improvements and repairs. Here's a list of what has been done. Despite all of this, the bridge is aging and getting to the point where maintenance alone just won't cut it. The report puts forward a timeline of how deterioration of the bridge will progress if no action is taken, with the closure of the footpaths the first part. They suggest that traffic restrictions would need to be in place during the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2032, and by 2035 all heavy vehicles would no longer be able to cross the bridge. By the bridge's 100th birthday, private vehicles and the adventure climb would have to be restricted, and 5 years after that, the bridge would no longer be safe to use and would need to be closed. In formulating a plan of attack, the Restoration Committee examined other bridges around the world with similar age, size and scale to the Story Bridge based on publicly accessible information. They looked at the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Tappan Zee Bridge in New York, the Golden Gate Bridge and the Jacques Cartier Bridge in Canada, which is said to have provided inspiration for the Story Bridge. The main focus of the case studies seems to be how much has been spent on their preservation, who funded the works, and over what period of time. But here's where we get to what some have pointed to as a problem with the Australian political system. Griffith University's adjunct professor of transport and urban planning and deputy director of the city's research institute, Matthew Burke, has been quoted as saying that the federal government has all the money, the state government most of the powers, and the city councils have all of the problems and none of the power and none of the money.
The people with the money in the Australian system is the federal government. There's an issue here that state and federal governments that chip in and build major transport infrastructure regularly hand that over to councils who really at the end of the life of that asset cannot afford to renew, restore or rebuild that infrastructure, but they're often asked to do so.
And the Story Bridge Restoration Committee agree, saying that the only way the restoration works can be carried out will be with funding from all three levels of government: local, state and federal. And of course, one thing that's gotten people upset is the suggestion that revenue could be raised by adding tolls to people crossing the Story Bridge. Now, this has been floated as an option. Another option raised by the Story Bridge Restoration Committee is a voluntary levy that could be added to council rates, similar to what was done when they were raising money to restore the City Hall. The voluntary levy, or the bridge toll, has been called a last resort measure by the Lord Mayor, assuming they can't get funds from the state and federal governments.
I'm confident that we'll get support from other levels of government. And so discussion of a tolling, obviously Nigel had to consider that as one of the options, but that's the option if we don't get funding from other levels of government. I will point out though that Brisbane City Council in its own right does not have the power or legislative authority to introduce a toll. Tolling decisions are made by the state government.
But how much will it cost and what's the timeline? Before we get to that, a quick shout out to the winner of Best International Travel Insurance for Value in Finder's 2024 Travel Insurance Awards, local Brisbane business Wise and Silent Travel Insurance. They won the 2024 Value Award because it costs less on average, but covers you for more. They're also the official travel insurance provider for Australian passengers on Scoot Airlines and the sponsor of this video. Backed by a global insurance provider and a 24/7 medical assistance team, the rave reviews on Trustpilot confirm that you can travel with total peace of mind if you choose Wise and Silent for your next overseas trip. Click this QR code or the link in the video description to get an exclusive 10% discount on your premium. Okay, to the cost and the timeline. Well, at a recent press conference held to announce the release of the report, Nigel Charmier, chair of the committee, was not willing to give a specific number, but said that it would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
I can't give you a number. That's the purpose of the business case. We've now got the funding for that. As I mentioned, we're going out to the market now, calling for expressions of interest from consultants to do that, and that will show us how to do it, both in terms of funding, the amount of money required, a timetable, and also how we can manage to do this with minimum disruption to the community.
Do you have even a ballpark figure?
No, I can't give you a ballpark figure. Lots of numbers have been tossed around.
So $80 million since 2019, yes. Doing the maths there, so it'd be hundreds of millions. That would be a safe estimate.
Absolutely.
That's opposed to the multiple billions that it would cost to replace the bridge with a new one and to demolish the old one. As far as a specific timeline, that's something they're waiting for the completion of the business case to reveal. So make sure you're subscribing, as I'll definitely be revealing the details of that one when it's released here on the Brisbane Channel. Clearly, the biggest immediate concern is the closure of the footpaths. While the Lord Mayor has said that getting that sorted would be a priority, many question the refusal of council to convert one of the road lanes to a temporary active transport thoroughfare. The argument given by council has been that it would be necessary to close 2 traffic lanes to do so, and that this would cause too much congestion and disruption to traffic across the inner city road network. However, some transport experts suggest that this may not be the case. Just as adding lanes has been shown not to improve congestion in the long term, as it encourages more people to drive, actually increasing the number of vehicles taking the same road, the phenomenon known as induced demand, the opposite has also been noted in cities where roads have been narrowed or closed. As the situation changes, people also change their behaviour. They may choose to take public transport instead of driving, or even choose not to make a trip when it isn't essential. That's what happened in Cheonggyechon, in Seoul, Korea, where the Seoul Metropolitan Government dismantled a 10-lane roadway and a 4-lane elevated highway that carried over 170,000 vehicles a day. The project saw an increase in both bus and subway ridership, as well as pedestrian activity. In Paris, policy to downsize and reduce roadways in recent decades has not improved traffic flow, but it's also not become worse. That's not to say that there would be no disruption were a lane to be taken from the existing lanes, just that it might not be as dramatic as Brisbane City Council expect. We'll be following how things progress with the bridge restoration, but also a bunch of other things happening across Greater Brisbane. The latest of our weekly updates is this one. There's a heap of great videos coming up soon, so I'll see you in the next video.